to have you guys joining us. So I'll hand it over to you to kick off your fireside chat.
Thank you so much, Emily. Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Hi, good. Good to see you.
Hi, great to see you too. And thank you everybody for joining. I'm Megan Owsik, as Emily said, SVP of Brand Partnerships at Whalar. For those who aren't familiar with Whalar, we are a full service influencer marketing and content creation solution. We combine tech, best-in-class talent, and creative social strategy to match brands with influential creators to create authentic content at scale. We leverage our strategic partnerships with Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snap, and Twitter to help our partners win on social. We are really proud to work with some of the world's top brands like Amazon, Netflix, General Mills, Dior, as well as many of Aveda's sister brands within Estee Lauder companies, including MAC, Estee Lauder brand Clinique, GlamGlow, and Origins. So I am so thrilled to be with you today, Rachael. I loved our initial conversation and hearing about your background and path to your current role at Aveda. Can you share with the audience your career journey?
Yeah, I would be happy to. Thanks for asking. So I know the topic today is women in marketing, and I was reflecting back even after our conversation, Megan, about my career, and I'm like, wow, I have had the opportunity to work for a lot of fantastic women-run organizations and just to be supported by so many amazing women throughout my career, and I wouldn't be here today without them. So it's kind of fun to think back on that. So my first role was actually in upstate New York, so near where I grew up, and I worked for this fantastic agency called Dixon Schwabel, full service marketing, advertising, communications. And I remember very distinctly that the owner of that agency, her whole mantra was always hire people smarter than you. And, I was like 21 when I worked there and actually interned there as well. But I still think about that, like literally every candidate I hire, I'm like, I need to hire someone smarter than me because they can teach me something. And I do think that, in the topic of women in marketing and comms, it can be so competitive. Women can be so hard and competitive with each other, but it doesn't have to be that way, right? So working at Dixon Schwabel, though I wasn't there for very long, that was such an important lesson to take with me and to learn that at a very young age, as I've been able to, hire some people throughout my career. So anyways, I was at Dixon Schwabel for a little while, but I knew if I really wanted to work in communications, if I wanted to grow my career in PR, I had to get to New York City. And it wasn't that far away, but mentally it was a big jump, right? When I was in college, I had met this amazing woman named Lori, and she worked at Marina Mar Communications. And I remember Lori just being so obsessed with her job and loving her job. And she was like, oh, I work on Secret and Venus, and we have the most amazing clients, and we work with celebrities. And I was like, I have to work there someday. So somehow I manifested this, and I had an opportunity to join the media team at MMC. So what was amazing about this was that I got to work across all of the accounts at the agency. So I was on CoverGirl, Head and Shoulders, Secret, Venus, Clairol, a couple of healthcare brands. But I spent the majority of my time working in beauty. And what we would do is craft the media strategies to generate news for the client. So that could look like helping with a new product launch and just doing like desk sides or things. Or it could look like us doing a big celebrity launch and working with talent. So back then we worked with like the Kardashian family a lot. We worked with Chrissy Teigen before she really blew up. Mm-hmm. So I got to go to a few dinners with Chrissy, which like watching her career just totally explode after that. Feels like a very, very long time ago. But this was a great agency to work for. And I think we're going to speak a little bit about some of the ways that MMC gave back. But one of the things I had the opportunity to do is I really started to travel a lot while I worked there. So through the company, they sponsored me to, we had a big fundraising competition and I won. So they allowed me to go to Uganda to visit a group of young girls that we sponsored their education. So it was amazing to be able to travel there on behalf of the company and share the impact that we had, because sponsoring these girls and working with She's the First was such an important part of the culture at MMC. it was something that really kept employees engaged. This idea of giving back and helping, where we could. So I did that, and then I got to travel to Sochi for the Winter Olympics. So I'm sure many of you remember that crazy Olympics where the buildings weren't built and things weren't complete. But it was such a fun experience getting to live there for essentially a month, and to just focus purely. We were working on the Procter & Gamble Thank You Mom campaign. So we worked with athletes on the ground, and then we sent all the assets back to pitch to the media based in the US. So anyways, then I was starting to see the world, right? And I wanted to see more. So I had the opportunity to move to Hong Kong. And when I got there, I actually landed a job at another female-owned agency. It was called Sinclair Communications. And while I was there, I worked on several restaurant clients, and then we had some other bigger consumer brands that we worked with, one being Swarovski. We also helped to launch Vita Coco in the market, the coconut water. And we did it through the power of influencers when influencers weren't really a thing in Hong Kong at the time. So that was a fun experience. And then from there, I had the opportunity to move in-house. So I took a role at a food delivery company called Deliveroo. And it is still today London's biggest tech startup. It was an amazing company to work for. And I was overseeing communications, corporate and consumer, across APAC and the Middle East. So Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, and the UAE. And this was one of the most fun places I've ever worked. I mean, it was just crazy all the time, growing so fast, jumping from one thing to the next. But I loved having the opportunity to work in-house and really understand the brand and work with a greater team. But from then it was time to move home, not home for me, but now home to my husband's hometown, Minneapolis. So I happened to start looking for roles that were based here, and it was crazy. The timing was just absolutely perfect because I opened up LinkedIn one day just to see what the job market was like in Minnesota. And I saw Aveda was hiring, and I was like, wow, I'm just going to apply.
All the stars aligned.
Here I am.
I love it. Talk to us a little bit about your role at Aveda. What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah. So at Aveda, I oversee global communications, influencer relations, and also sustainability. So because I'm on the global team, essentially what we do is we'll create the strategies that we then cascade to the regions. And then we'll work closely with them to help make sure that they're executing, they're finding executional success in all of their campaigns. So this could look like, and anyone who's worked in comms knows, but day to day it can be totally different. But it could be creating press kits and sending that out to our regions. It could be evaluating influence opportunities. We do have a global influencer that we work with, so managing that day-to-day relationship. It could be identifying a brand partnership. And now sustainability is part of my team. And that's because if you don't know Aveda, sustainability is really, really important to our brand. We're situated on this beautiful wildlife preserve in northern Minnesota, just a little bit outside of Minneapolis. And literally you walk outside on the campus and there are wild turkeys running around and deer. And of course I moved here from Hong Kong. So I get
a bit of a different vibe.
Wow, this is different. Yeah. But it's really just so perfect for the brand because sustainability is embedded in everything that we do. And of course that includes our communication and marketing strategy. So now as part of my team, we also look closely at any of our mission partnerships, also what our sustainability goals are. So for example, last year we completed a solar array at our headquarters. So my team's responsibility would be figuring out, okay, well, how are we going to communicate not only the fact that we've done this, but also the importance of this for a beauty company to the public. So that's essentially what our team is in charge of.
A lot. So other than, hiring people who are smarter than you, what are other characteristics that you look for when building your team?
Yeah, good question. So for me, I always think that you can pretty much learn any skill, right? And of course, it's important to have the basic skills of the role that we're looking for. But it's really fitting into the culture. So positivity, because we spend a lot of time together, right? If there's a big launch or something going on, we are together nonstop. And of course it's virtual now, but sometimes that makes things even harder. So making sure that, the candidate has a really positive can-do attitude. I would say adaptability. I think everyone watching this today knows that the landscape changes so fast that we have to be able to go and say, like, okay, what's our new strategy for this platform? Are we going to start using this platform? Does it make sense to bring influencers onto this? So, making sure that we can adapt our strategies as needed. And then for us, it's also mission alignment. So you don't have to be like a crunchy granola vegan or something to work at Aveda, but you have to be conscious of the world that you live in, and you have to essentially be interested in some sort of sustainability. Otherwise, it's probably not a good fit, because that's what we're talking about all the time, right? So that's important to us as well.
Yep, definitely. So that's a great segue on sort of the importance of, mission, and you touched upon She's the First. Love to sort of dig into your involvement with that organization and just, the importance, because I know you and I talked a lot about this, about really working for organizations that lift women up and prioritize giving back.
Yeah. It does feel like a little bit of a theme in the conversation, I guess, in the sense that it's about hiring people who are smarter than you and empowering the women that you work with, empowering the women around you. And at MMC, working with She's the First was a really important part of the team culture, and the way that everyone wanted to give back and wanted to help. And we worked really closely with the founders. And She's the First has grown so much since we worked with them. This was many years ago. So I'm sure they have many corporate sponsors that they're working with now. And I still follow along with those girls, and they're doing amazing things. But for us, it was really important and a consistent part of our internal communication narrative. So much so that it wasn't just, oh, let's do a fundraising competition and make a donation to this organization and it's over. It was, how are we continuing to care for and stay connected to these women that we're supporting? And when I got back from my trip to Uganda, I had noted that there was no girls only washroom at school. And we know that if there's no washroom for the girls at school, if they go to school and they have their period, then oftentimes they will just skip a whole week because they don't want to go in the restroom that they have to share with the boys. So at Marina Mar, what we did was raise money to build the washroom at the school. So it was actually after I had left and moved to Hong Kong, but I remember getting an email from my old colleagues that said, hey, that washroom that we initiated while you were here has just been completed. So it was amazing to see that. And it's something that the whole team was really proud of. And I see that now at Aveda. Not every organization I've worked with has had such an emphasis on CSR or sustainability, but both things are really important, right? So at Aveda, we give back around clean water, and we do that because ultimately it helps women. If women have clean water and they don't have to walk for hours a day to go and get it, they can focus on education. They can focus on building their own businesses. So we work with a partner called Charity Water now, and Charity Water really has an emphasis on transparency. And through our work with them, we've really been able to see the impact that we've had on the communities that we're donating to. So that's amazing. And I know something the entire Aveda team is really, really proud of as well, and very important part of our culture.
I love it. And I just love like the enthusiasm and the spark that you have when you talk about the organizations that are doing things that are sort of like bigger than ourselves. Because I could not agree more. It's incredibly important, and it makes people feel, like they are part of something bigger and mission-based. So I want to sort of shift back to female leaders. You talked about, having sort of these mentors along the way. I know that we've both had the opportunity to work for women who have, extremely high expectations, and they've mentored us and challenged us and pushed us. would love to talk about your experience at Deliveroo and how it, sort of impacted you personally and professionally.
Yeah. So for the audience, and what I was explaining to Megan the other day is I had this amazing boss at Deliveroo who was very intense, and she was intense because she believed in us. But she also had a reputation. She was once referred to by the Daily Mail as the pit bull. So you can imagine how she was to work for. But she wanted us to win. We were up against Uber Eats. We were up against another food delivery company called Food Panda. And this is a startup culture. And we wanted to make sure that in every single thing we were doing, we were beating the competition. And that included communications. So it was, no longer a just normal strategy of making sure that we're getting press coverage maybe once a month. It was, we need in every single market 2 stories a week. And our team first said, this is impossible. There's no way we can generate this type of media coverage, especially in these smaller markets. But the thing is, we somehow did it. We pushed ourselves to be as absolutely creative as we possibly could. We used all of our resources. We looked at outside partnerships. And we pushed our own internal teams to move on things that we thought were really important because we were trying to meet our goal of beating the competition, essentially. So, reflecting back on my time working at Deliveroo, I was there just under 2 years. So it wasn't a very long time, but it was a very impactful time because I achieved so much. So, I did it through the support of my boss, who essentially said, let's go get it. Let's go get the competition. Let's get the coverage. And there's no way I could have done it without her. And I would say for me, it's a career highlight was working at Deliveroo and working with her and having the support to also work independently and have the autonomy to be able to just make decisions and do things that we knew would move the needle and just be able to move really fast. So I think it's something that's really important. And although I think the management style can be off-putting at first, essentially working for someone who has really high expectations like that, but also believes in you is very, very empowering.
Definitely. And so, yeah, it builds confidence and you kind of look back on that time and say, I did that. And I didn't necessarily think I could do that. So yeah, it's really important to have people like that in your life. Speaking of, are there any favorite female business leaders that you follow on social?
That's a good question. And I have maybe a random answer, but right now, the accounts that I'm obsessed with following is the Peloton community. So I'm a big Peloton user since I moved here, and it's not as easy to actually, there's a Soul Cycle, but it hasn't opened yet because of the pandemic. So I got a Peloton, luckily, right before the pandemic. But what I love about the community is that all of the instructors, they really, really support each other and are always lifting each other up. They're always talking about how amazing the other instructor is. And they're best friends. And it's a really nice thing to watch because it makes you as a user or viewer or whatever feel really connected to that community, like a caring, warm, welcoming community of people that it's sort of like a family, right? So even though you are never going to class with these people, you're never seeing these instructors in person, I think they've done such an amazing job of cultivating a virtual community in a way that I've never seen before. So I've been just loving following their journey and seeing how they truly support each other and embrace this idea of the Peloton family and community at large. I think it's really, really special. And I think what a lot of organizations strive for.
I love that. So speaking of influential people, let's talk a little bit about the world of influencer. when we talked last week, we talked about, in sort of our previous lives, having that front row seat in how rapidly consumer behavior changed, and really the expansion of where consumers are, getting inspired and informed. You had talked about in your earlier PR days, in addition to traditional press, you started to engage what we then called bloggers, and today call influencers. Can you talk a little bit about that shift?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's been such an interesting journey. So when I was working at Marina Mar, I really focused on traditional media, so print media, online media. And at that time, we had 4 or 5 people who really focused on that traditional media. And then we had one person who was working with the bloggers, as we called them at the time. But while I was at MMC, that team really, really started to grow. And that's when things really started to shift. So I remember very distinctly being in a meeting where they said to us, okay, guys, there's something bigger going on here. We can no longer call these people bloggers, they're influencers. And that's when we started integrating influencers into all of our strategies. I mean, it was making sure that they were invited to every single event, received all the press materials, received the products early. But also at the time, and we still have to do this today, but there's a delicate balance of how do you integrate influencers into an event or a dinner with traditional media, because there does still have to be a separate strategy and a lot of consideration being put into how you tackle both. So for us, like now, it's creating a special narrative for the media versus, maybe for an influencer, depending on who the influencer is, it's maybe focusing on that special narrative, but also just making sure that they're helping us get news out in real time. But what was interesting too is so I moved to Hong Kong sort of when the shift was happening, but then when I got to Hong Kong, things were still a little bit behind. And I remember sitting in meetings with my greater team and talking about our press strategies and how we were going to engage press and saying, well, hey, what are we going to do for influencers? And we were just starting to introduce this idea, and we were really just starting to build our roster of who the local influencers were and how we could embed them into our strategy. But I remember when we were launching Vita Coco actually in Hong Kong, we knew that having a good influencer Instagram strategy for their launch was really important. So we put together these super cool mailers where we had these treasure chests full of coconut water, and we shipped out a ton of coconut water to the influencers. And I remember everyone was like, oh, wow, that really helped to move the needle, got a ton of engagement, a ton of likes, and started to get people talking about the launch in Hong Kong. Of course, now influencers in Hong Kong and China, I mean, it's huge, but it was just interesting at the time to look back to see, how we've come a very, very long way in actually a short period of time in the space.
Absolutely. At Whalar, we talk a lot about the importance of authenticity when it comes to influencer partnerships. We certainly pride ourselves on, matching our brand partners with creators that are true fans of the brand and can really authentically tell that brand story. And I know, at Aveda, authenticity is incredibly important. How do you and your team think about that within the context of influencer?
It is the most important thing to us at Aveda. And we go to great lengths to make sure that we have authentic partnerships. So we have, I think what's super unique to Aveda that I haven't seen anywhere else with any other brand is that we have a very long list of things that we have to watch out for with anyone that we will partner with, because we absolutely do not want to jeopardize that authenticity. And with a brand like Aveda with really, really strong values, and this is a 40-year-old company. So it's not a brand that's just been around for a couple of years where maybe things are a little bit lighter, so to speak. This is a brand with very, very deep values. And, we are talking about things that are very important to us. For example, we announced earlier this year, just in January, that we're 100% vegan. So now, of course, Aveda's not going to partner with an influencer who loves going to McDonald's on Saturdays for a treat, because that just wouldn't align with who we are. And like I said, you don't have to be vegan to sit with us, but if you're going to represent our brand, then you have to live a conscious life. So that's something that is really important in everything that we do, and even with partnerships. So we're launching this year our first ever designer partnership. And we decided to work with the brand 3-1 Philip Lim. And we had some media interviews yesterday with Philip Lim, and it reminded me how aligned we are in terms of our brand values, in the sense that we talk about sustainability, not just for the planet, but human sustainability, how we talk about caring for the world around us. And Philip Lim is not, I guess, like a paid spokesperson for our brand, right? He's not a brand ambassador or brand advocate, but I mean, I couldn't have written the talking points better myself. The way he was talking about our partnership and his enthusiasm for the partnership, it comes from a place of authenticity. We've been working together for more than 10 years. We started working together at Fashion Week, and then the relationship and the partnership has evolved over time. So it was sort of a natural next step to say, okay, we want to do a designer partnership. We want to create a collection with a designer. Who can that be? Let's work with Philip, because his brand is so aligned with ours. And obviously brand partnerships are so important now, and we're seeing so many of them, but to build one that is truly built on this foundation of authenticity feels so real and so easy to talk about at the same time. So I'm hoping it's now launching, so you'll be able to see hopefully all the press coverage and the influencer stories, and it's now on our website. But I think that's going to come to life in a really, really special, unique way, because it has that foundation and that strong story.
I can't wait. There's nothing better than thinking, I couldn't have written that script better.
Right?
It's a really, really good feeling.
Yeah.
And I know that you recently appointed your first ever global advocate for sustainability, Arizona Muse. Can you share a little bit about that partnership?
Yeah. So in the brand's 40-year history, we've never had a global brand ambassador. And we've talked about, I mean, I joined the company almost 4 years ago, and we've talked about a lot of different people, a lot of potential candidates. And it's very, very hard to find someone who, matches up with everything that we want to do. And what's amazing about Arizona is that she's a model turned sustainability activist, and she's really dedicated her whole life to educating herself on sustainability. She just last week went to this amazing course in Spain all about regenerative agriculture. So she's educating herself, but she's also educating all of her followers. So although Arizona might not be a celebrity in the traditional sense, what she's able to do for our brand is help to explain to consumers why the things that we do in sustainability are important. So why is solar important? Why is recycled packaging important? Why is transparency in sourcing important? It's some of the things that are a little bit harder to convey, that she can translate for us, but also because of Arizona's lifestyle and the fact that she still is modeling. It's demonstrating to the consumer that you don't have to sacrifice performance for sustainability. You can have both. You can have a product that is made from natural ingredients, but also one that really works. So having that like duality to the messaging is really important. It's something that Arizona has helped to share that narrative for us.
Amazing. Speaking of brand ambassadors, can you talk a little bit about your stylists, the stylist ambassadors, and just like their incredible enthusiasm for the brand?
Yeah, I think I was telling you when we spoke on Friday that I think Aveda is a brand that's so lucky in the sense that, we don't have a ton of employees. However, we have a huge network of stylists who work at the Aveda salons. And most of them went to Aveda Institute, so are very, very familiar with the ethos of the brand, of course, familiar with the products. And they live and breathe the brand every day. So we had an event just a few weeks ago, actually, a virtual event, though I was there in person behind the scenes. And it was amazing to be able to once again interact with the stylists who are living and breathing the brand every day and to understand their passion for the brand. So how that translates is these people are micro influencers at such a massive scale for Aveda. So being able to work with them and tap into their the power of their audience and their network is something that's really, really important and special for our brand, because they can go out there and share all of the amazing things that I just spoke about, like Arizona, for example, but they're telling their guests in a different way. Not just through their social channels, but also when they have their guests in the chair for how long have you sat at the salon? 1, 2, 3. I feel like I've sat at the salon for like 4 hours at a time, right? So you have this person in the chair that you're educating on how amazing the brand is, some of the brand milestones, whether that's like, doing something for Earth Month, whether that's the holiday collaboration that I just mentioned with Philip Lim. So I think we're in such a unique position to have this like army of ambassadors essentially for the brand just built into the network.
It's amazing. So just, being mindful of, audience members and some that might be sort of starting out and figuring out how to navigate their careers. You're obviously a very accomplished marketer, but just curious, what's been sort of your biggest challenge so far? And then I would love to hear like something that you're most proud of.
Biggest challenge I would have to say now is the pace of things is just, it's crazy. It's so crazy how fast things happen and how fast people forget. So I think like on one side, there's this challenge of always wanting to generate new news, to stay on top of the news cycle, to stay, in front of the consumer. So, whether you're sending out new product news or whether you're announcing something, but, making sure you're always in the media or in people's feeds. I think that has been super challenging. Also considering that there's less media than before. But then, similarly, but I guess kind of on the flip side is that if something negative happens, that can also just spiral out of control so fast and gain a lot of traction. I mean, we've seen it with, we can come up with millions of examples. So it's making sure that, we stay on top of anything that could be potentially negative for the brand. So I think the connectivity, well, of course it's amazing. And here we are, talking to each other from New York and Minneapolis. I love being connected. I love technology, but I think it's made things really, really challenging for us. And then to answer your other question about biggest achievement, I would have to say that, so when I was working in Hong Kong at Deliveroo, we were launching what a lot of people know as dark kitchens. So essentially, if you are in the East Village in New York City, but there's no Thai food in the neighborhood, but there's Thai food maybe in the Upper East Side that's super, super popular. We could assume by looking at our data that this Thai restaurant would do really, really well in the East Village. So what we could do is what we did do was we would open what we call dark kitchens, and we essentially rent out a building, build in just a small kitchen. So think of like, the tiniest kitchen you could imagine for a restaurant, and then just do delivery only from that building. But at the time while we were launching this, there was a lot of fear and unknown around dark kitchens because, partially because of the name, right? Like you don't know, you can't see inside, you don't know what's going on in there. It's not the same as like your favorite restaurant that you think you're ordering from. It's totally different. So when we were launching this, we had to be really careful with our media strategy to make sure that the consumers understood it as like an amazing benefit to them, because of course it is, right? They're getting their food faster. We're making sure they can get their favorite restaurant delivered in 20 minutes or less. So our media strategy was really, really important. And it was also important to generate awareness around this and celebrate it, because on the flip side too, it was important to investors that we were winning in this space. So I would say for me, it was having that launch and launching it in Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, and Dubai was one of the coolest things I've done in my career, because it was so important for the company.
Awesome. Rachael, there's a question from the audience. How important is the data behind influencer marketing? Do the metrics drive the messaging? And I think I actually was going to ask you something similar, like data informing your strategy. What does that look like?
Yeah. Data is super important to us, and it's definitely something that we look at for any partnership that we have. And I would say too, like at the regional level, where our teams are working directly with influencers and, you know, making sure their success, the data is important. However, there might be different metrics for success. So I've spent some time like consulting with the regions on, you know, what is the outcome that you're looking for? Because we've found challenges, for example, in the past on an influencer not driving sales, but then I had them look at the awareness metric and it was huge, right? So I think it's, yes, having the data is really important, but understanding how to use the data is just as important, because there's so many amazing tools now that we can tap into, and making sure that we're also looking at that from a global lens of how do we translate from region to region and make sure that we're using the tools that we have available to meet all of our common goals.
Awesome. Okay, so it looks like we only have about a minute left. So my last question is, what advice would you give your younger self?
What advice would I give my younger self? Don't be so afraid of everything and just go for it. I mean, I think I in hindsight, I spent so much time worrying about like what's coming next, what's the next thing, and everything's fine. Everything worked out just fine. And of course, like I took some risks. Like when I moved to Hong Kong, I didn't have a job, but I spent my first probably 3 weeks living there, worrying about whether or not I was going to get a job, and I didn't enjoy myself.
Right.
So I would say, yes, I wish I had the knowledge that everything would be okay and work out, and I didn't worry so much about the next step, because everything ultimately falls into place.
Yeah, absolutely. Rachael, this was so great. It's like so lovely to connect with other women in marketing. Definitely, you know, particularly valuable to me. And I'm sure many of the audience members, to understand your perspective on, you know, the influencer world. A huge thanks to Brand Innovators for hosting us and everyone that joined. This was fantastic.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you, Megan. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks so much for joining us, guys. That was a great note to end on. So appreciate it. And I know we have a lot